some dignitaries would come from Krishnagar, and so one morning we saw some blinking, police car lights coming, and we said, oh, some hotshots coming out, to visit. And it turned out to be the Indian secret police. And at that time, the Bangladesh war was going on, and they came into our property, and they got out of the cars, and they said, we've come to arrest Americans for being spies, CIA agents. And so at that time there was only two, myself and Jayapataka. And so they said, we'll take one of you, because they didn't know what they were doing either. They said, we'll take one of you, and if we can prove that you're a spy, we'll come and arrest the others later. And so I said, okay, Jayapataka, he's more important to the Mayapur project than me. So I said, take me. And so they put me in shackles and drove me to Krishnagar, and then again transported me from there to Calcutta. And in Calcutta, the US Embassy was notified that they had arrested a spy, and they sent someone to act as my legal aid. And we'd gone to court several times, and eventually they proved that I wasn't a spy. But in that intern, my visa had expired. And so the government of India wanted to save face, so they sentenced me to 6 months in prison. And the prison was very, I had like a 10-foot by 8-foot room with no toilet, nothing, just a cement floor, and I had to stay in there. And finally, when I was released, Srila Prabhupada, had, he called me into his room. He had heard about this, and he was in Bombay when I was arrested, but then he was on his way to outside of the country. But then when he returned, I got released, and then he called me into his room, and he said, first he said, how are you? How are you? And I said, I'm okay, Srila Prabhupada. And he says, do you want to go back to America? So I said, no, Srila Prabhupada, I want to go back to Mayapur and do my service. And then he said, oh, that's very good. And then he began to, tell me the story. He said, there was once a little boy, and this boy had a terrible father who, in so many ways, became envious of him because he was a devotee of Krishna. And he tried in so many ways to torture him and to change his way of behaving. And, and then I realized he's talking about Prahlad Maharaj. And then he says, yes, the devotees of Krishna, they are willing to go to hell. To know that even though he's not present, he's still thinking of his devotees, wherever they are in the world. Because, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, at that time, he mentions that his disciples are being arrested. He doesn't use my name, but the circumstances are, because of the time that he was, he could have been in Australia or wherever he was, in the middle of the night, doing his translations, having concern for his, his disciples, and so. On our return trip, we stopped, I think it was in Surat, and this encounter, this was documented, and there's a lot of nice film of that. And then we'd gone to Indore, but in the train there was a mix-up, and they were not able to get Srila Prabhupada a first-class ticket, and so he rode with us in third class. So third class is, you can't even imagine that, how inconvenient it is. But I was in charge of the food. I had a bunch of, savories and things such as that. And I had been carrying them with me on the journey. And then Srila Prabhupada asked me, says, I'm hungry, please feed me. So I gave him some samosa and some kachoris, and he began eating them. And then he pointed to the other devotees and said, please feed everybody, give these devotees. So I gave everyone their remnants or their prasadam. And then he looked at me and says, now you eat. So I began eating, and then he said, give me another kachori. And so I'm thinking that my right hand is dirty. And what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And in the third class cars, every third car, they had a little tiny water fountain in the sink. And so in order for me to get there and wash my hand and run back, it would take a long amount of time. So I kept looking down the aisleway like this. And Srila Prabhupada, he knew what I was thinking, because he says, you may use your left hand. He said, sometimes the left hand is okay. So just for me, there were many instances where he knew what I was thinking, and he responded in kind. So one other example of this is, this was in Mayapur, and this was, I think, in 1974, when they had one of the first big, Mayapur festivals where devotees from other countries had come. And we were on a morning walk. There was a limited number of us walking with Srila Prabhupada along the Ganga. And as we were walking, in the bushes on the side, there were people who were doing their morning duties, and the smells were wafting up. And there was a pansiwala, that's the boatman, plying his boat along the edge of the river back and forth. And Srila Prabhupada was looking at that, and then he began to tell us the stories of Gopal, between him and Krishnagar, and how, passing stool and this and that. And when Srila Prabhupada began to tell these stories, this was the first time that I'd ever heard him, in any respect at all, have some type of mundane conversation, and he was telling us these stories of, and I'm thinking, where's the spiritual input into this? And I was very confused, and then he said, the spiritual significance is very subtle, So he knew what I was thinking, so